Deep in the wormways, you'll find traces of something Pharloom now calls plasmium. It is a substance that they believe cures all things. Mr. Carwash mascot even believes it's possible to use it to cheat death. But there is a steep consequence to plasmium, which is known in Hornet as Lifeblood. There is a reason it was taboo in the Pale King's land, and yet unlike Hornet, there is no Pale King to save Pharloom. And in today's video we're going to be delving into just how Pharloom is going to fall in one of the future DLCs, and just what exactly Lifeblood is and who controls it. A small percentage of the people that watch these videos are actually subscribed. If and only if at the end of the video you have enjoyed, please consider leaving a like and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel and lets me know you're enjoying this style of content. Grab some prawns, friends, and enjoy. Before we delve into the consequences of Lifeblood, we first need to talk about what Lifeblood actually is. Lifeblood is a blue substance which supposedly heals all things, makes you stronger. But the consequence of this is your mind. When you take too much Lifeblood inside of Silksong, Hornet even comments on this. She says, although it provides some regenerative aid, I feel my mind at dangerous risk of being overtaken. This sentiment is echoed with Zolital. I've probably butchered that name, and if I have, I'm very sorry. At the beginning of his quest, he seems like a very smart bug. Zolital's master was the first person who found Lifeblood inside of Pharloom. It was on the edges of the kingdom in salt-soaked water. Due to the location, it seems that Lifeblood was not able to be spread to the rest of Pharloom. If you didn't know, in real life, salt water can physically trap normal water due to differences in density. It seems to me that Lifeblood was in a similar situation. It was enclosed and trapped in salt water. Zolital's master orders him to take it to a different foreign environment, aka the caves of the Wormways. They plant the Lifeblood and allow it to take root inside the Wormways. Lifeblood inside of Hornet is considered taboo. We are not told directly in the first game why this is. All we see is some pretty butterflies and some things that make a lot of sense in hindsight. We never actually see any creatures afflicted by Lifeblood inside the first game. But Hornet makes a strange remark inside of Silksong. She mentions she has seen these beasts before, in the halls and caves of Hornet. This implies an infection of Lifeblood is something that has happened in Hornet's past. That explains why it is considered taboo, but it's long enough that people have started to dabble in it once more, and forgot exactly why it is so dangerous. So dangerous that the Pale King sealed it away, or at least tried his very best to. As seen by the fact the abyss creature we're going to talk about in just a little while is found sealed in the same place the vessels are. I do not believe it's a coincidence that Lifeblood room is there. If you have 15 or more Lifeblood hearts and you go down to the abyss, there's a secret passageway that leads to a Lifeblood door. With the vast amounts of Lifeblood, the door opens for you and you enter into this room that has the same dream patterning as you see inside of, well, dreams inside of Hollow Knight. Let's get this straight, the area is really pretty, but don't let that deceive you. As you venture through, there's a slight hidden character in the background you might have missed. There's this collection of blinking eyes, and the game files call this the Abyss Creature. The Abyss Creature is heavily mysterious. It only pops up one other time inside of Hollow Knight, and that's in Godhome. The Abyss Creature is dark, yes, but it also has Lifeblood eyes. A telltale sign that they've been infected by Lifeblood. All those infected fully with Lifeblood have this. The room in the Abyss has dream patterning, and when you pick up one of the two items, you end up being transported out in the same way you get transported out of a dream. Considering the only two times we see the Abyss Creature is either in Godhome, which is a dream, and the Abyss Room, which is a dream, I think it's fair to say the Abyss Creature is living inside of dreams. Do you know who also lives inside of dreams? The Radiants. I think it's very likely that the higher being that is controlling the Lifeblood is in fact this Abyss Creature. It makes perfect sense, and it actually parallels with the Radiants so much. There are so many hints between the two. Hornet directly says that the infection of Lifeblood is very similar to a different infection. It might originally sound like she's talking about the previous Lifeblood infection inside of Hollow Knight, but how she talks, it more seems she's talking about the Radiants. Lifeblood and Plasmium are obviously the same thing. And yet, when it comes to this other infection she's talking about, she has doubts it's the same kind of thing. But there's still a large part of her mind that sees the connections and wonders if she's just making connections that aren't there. but even us, the player, can see the connections as well. And that is the connection between the Radiance's infection and the Abyss creatures, aka the Lifeblood infection. I'm going to list off some similarities. First of all, the brightly coloured eyes. A lot of the bugs infected by the Radiance have these orange eyes. Obviously not all of them, but even so, when you kill the ones that don't have it, they explode into orange. Likewise, those that are consumed by Lifeblood have bright blue eyes, and when defeated, explode into blue. The second connection comes into parallels. The Radiance is symbolised by the above, by the sun, whereas Lifeblood is symbolised by the Abyss, hence the Abyss creature and the fact it's located in roots, which helps the Lifeblood cocoons form, and roots are also found deeper underground, which further symbolises the two different angles, high above and below. Both the Radiance and the Abyss creature are only found inside of dreams. Dreams seem to be the sanctuary of these two beings. Lifeblood is often symbolised by butterflies. They're everywhere, blue versions, wherever Lifeblood is. The Radiance is seen as a moth. I'm sure some of us when we were younger got confused between moths and butterflies because they look so similar. That is not coincidence. Moths and butterflies actually belong to the same insect order. Lepidoptera. I have no idea how to say that. I'm very sorry, and it's on the screen right now. Both moths and butterflies share a common ancestor and a basic life cycle of egg, larvae, pupa and adult. There is a definitive parallel in the real world between both moths and butterflies. I think they're using that connection between butterflies and moths to show a parallel between the Radiance and the Abyss creature, aka the Lifeblood higher being. They are both so different and yet so similar. I definitely think it's worth mentioning that other higher beings have this Dreamcatcher dream symbol. For example, Un's is green and the Grimtropes is red. Even considering this, I think there's a lot to say there's a connection between the Radiance and that of the Abyss creature and their respective illnesses and their respected powers. The nail in the coffin for me is the blob parasite and the Lifeblood seed. They are identical. The first one is from the Radiance and the second one is from the Lifeblood. That was a massive tangent, so I'm going to go back onto the effects of the Lifeblood and also how that manifests. Those consumed by the Lifeblood fully are filled to the brim with the blue liquid, to an extent that even Bonnie Blue would go green with envy. And it doesn't just fill the body up with Lifeblood, it transfigures vital fluids into that Lifeblood. It isn't just filling up the empty spaces, it's completely changing the person, or the bug. We can see this more in the wormways. The bugs there that have been mutated have new parts on themselves that wasn't there before. A little cool detail I wanted to talk about but really doesn't have much lore implications is when you hit one of these Lifeblood affected creatures. When you hit them, their body pulses and Lifeblood spews out. This just shows how much the insides are filled to the brim with Lifeblood. Like I said, not 100% important, but it's something to mention. On the topic of mutated creatures, I thought it was very fitting to say these motherfuckers are not alive. Zolital is in the later stages of it and eventually succumbs to the Lifeblood. The other creatures are no exception, they are dead. We find out from the journal entry of Zolital's apprentice, when you find him in Act 3, that he is being controlled by the Lifeblood. His body is a husk that the Lifeblood is now inhabiting, and yet previous faculties have been lost. Nothing more than a mindless beast stumbling around. This loss of faculties is something we also see in Zolital. At the start of his quest, he is a smart and intelligent man, dedicated to his research. But in Act 3, all that research, all that dedication is gone. The research equipment has been destroyed, symbolising Zolital's fall. When we find him, he's virtually not himself. He's a mumbling mess, can't get a whole sentence out without pausing, and before long, he's gone. No doubt in the DLC, I imagine he'll come back as a boss, just like his apprentice. Back onto the other creatures, it's most likely, considering that the apprentice became a husk, that these creatures are as well. The attacks that the creatures in the Wormways use is very similar to that of the apprentice, that being shooting these lobs of blue. This might be a reach, but these lobs of blue remind me a lot of, say, when we're fighting Lost Kin. It's infected by the Radiance's illness, and it shoots lobs of orange at us. They look quite similar in shape to the ones we see in the Wormways, but as I said, it could just be a coincidence. The fact Lifeblood inhabits husks of beings and then mutates them, gives us a much clearer explanation on why Lifeblood is called false life. I briefly mentioned earlier a DLC in regards to Lifeblood, and I definitely do think there is one coming. The story of Lifeblood is simply not finished. It leaves on a cliffhanger. The infection is clearly spreading inside of Act 3, and the only people that know about it is us. For Zalital has lost his faculties, and I doubt he's venturing out of the wormways to warn anyone. Meaning this infection will likely spread, resulting in a disaster that this kingdom does not have a Pale King to fix. The Pale King did some truly terrible things, but they were for the right reasons. Everything we know points towards him truly caring about Hornet. Grandmother Silk shows no sign of this. Inside of Hornet, the Pale King gave beings and bugs higher thought. In Pharloom, Grandmother Silk controls and manipulates her followers, bends them to her will. Considering that fact, I think it's very likely that this infection is going to go unnoticed, and eventually it's going to consume Pharloom, resulting in the DLC. I can't be the only one who found it very fitting that the infection, the spread of Lifeblood, happens at Act 3. When Pharloom is overtaken by the Abyss, that is when the infection truly begins to speed up. Almost as if the Abyss acts as a catalyst for the Lifeblood to grow, which isn't very far-fetched at all when you consider an Abyss creature is likely the higher being that is associated with Lifeblood. I believe the DLC we were talking about earlier will happen inside of Act 3. Something that also shows that this is going to escalate and people aren't going to do much about it until at least it's too late, is Yarnaby. When you're infected by Lifeblood, if you go to Yarnaby, he will not treat you seriously. He will not treat you at all. He does not believe Lifeblood is a threat. This goofy goober decides that it's fine because it has some benefits. The fact this is a top physician and his opinion is fuck it, in my opinion tells you everything you need to know on whether there is going to be a cure found. Blue Child Joni is a character that can be found on the edges of Hornet. Joni was labelled a heretic amongst Hornet, and deep away in the caves she died. But before her death, she bestowed blessings of Lifeblood upon perhaps multiple people. Upon her grave, we can find one such blessing. Joni appears in the form of dream essence above her grave. Strangely enough, Joni does not possess the characteristic blue eyes associated with Lifeblood infection. A possible way of how Joni does this and survives the infection can be seen from Hornet. She says, "My unique shell can resist the darker deformations of this substance, but even I have limits." Hornet also does not possess the characteristic blue eyes of the Lifeblood infection, even though she is infected. I believe the same thing is happening when it comes to Joni. She seems to have a body made out of Lifeblood, by the fact that Joni's blessing transfigures vital fluids into Lifeblood. But she herself is not fully consumed. We do not see the blue eyes. Although, like Hornet, her mind is slowly starting to decay, as seen by the fact she mentions she's having trouble remembering things as of late, which is in line with the decay of the mind we also see with Zalital. Obviously with Joni it's a lot slower process, perhaps due to her own unique shell. What that shell actually is though, we don't know. But considering that Hornet's shell is made up of the Pale King, a worm, and Hera the Beast, which was a weaver, I think it's fair to say there's a high chance that Joni is the child of some kind of higher being. I wanted to add this last little bit in here because I thought it did have some merit. It's not confirmed by any means, but considering the parallels, I do think there's a chance. We know the Radiants created the moth species. This is the same species that gives us the power to access dreams with the dream nail. Would it be so far-fetched to think that, considering the parallels, something similar happened with the Abyss creature, that it also created a species of its own? As I mentioned previously, I believe Joni's species was created by a higher being. What if the higher being was the Abyss creature? Here's the evidence. Joni has two antennas coming up from the top of her head. Butterflies also have the same thing. If you look at Joni's arms, you'll notice they have the same sort of hooks on the ends that butterflies have on the end of their legs. In the centre of a butterfly's body there are three sections: the head, the thorax and the abdomen. On Joni we can see two parts, the head and the thorax. And yet when it comes to the third part, the abdomen, it does not look like there's any abdomen on Joni. In our real world, butterflies that are missing their abdomen will die. Although there is a condition called zombie butterfly that comes about from missing an abdomen. This presents itself as an itchy body and almost like it is pulsing for something to come out, hence the zombie part. Does that sound similar to anyone? Yes, it sounds very similar to Lifeblood. Reproductive organs are also found in the abdomen. I believe in the case of Joni and her species, the Lifeblood has adapted their bodies to this new situation, missing their abdomen. This sort of mutating process is very similar to what happened with the Weavers. They were originally spiders in the dark, before Grandmother Silk altered them and made them into her children. I'm aware I called this whole thing with Joni quite speculatory, and that's because it's never directly said. Saying that, I think there is quite a lot of evidence that suggests Joni is designed after a butterfly. And considering Lifeblood that is also associated with Joni is associated with butterflies, it makes a lot of sense. I fully believe that Joni and her species were created by the Abyss creature or whatever higher being is in control of Lifeblood. Joni, by the sounds of it, gave out these blessings. She's called the kindly heretic. If she has an immunity, stronger perhaps even than Hornet's, perhaps this child truly didn't understand the dangers of the Lifeblood. Perhaps even so when she spread it through her blessings, which would go on to infect Hornet. Her repose perhaps being one of the last bastions of Lifeblood still readily available inside of Hornet. I think that's the best explanation on how the Hornet infection happened. It's very plausible there were other things that happened that led to it getting as big as it possibly did, but I think Joni also played a role, considering she's called a heretic. The friendly and child part perhaps symbolising the naivety that came about with her immunity, or at least partial immunity. So everyone, that is the end of the video. I really did enjoy making this video. I'm always up for constructive criticism, so if there was anything in the video you don't agree with, let me know. I genuinely want to improve, as I want to make the best content possible for all of you. If you did enjoy, please consider leaving a like and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel and lets me know you're enjoying this style of content. Without any further ado, Dan, please friends, don't you dare go hollow, and may you find your worth in the waking world. See you in the next one, and goodbye.